Y'all ready for this? Welcome to Sports Kid Drama Kid. I'm Jim. I'm the Sports Kid.
I'm Andi. I'm the Drama Kid.
And if you're new here, if you caught the Beanie Feldstein, Liam Michelle fire, welcome.
If you rode the funny girl wave over here.
Yeah. But anyway, today we're going to keep it topical.
We really are.
We're going to talk about the Netflix show, the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders, like America's Sweethearts, whatever.
The documentary series, yes. The DCC show.
Yeah. And we watched the whole thing.
We did.
We realized that this was happening and then binged it over the weekend so we could do this episode. And
it wasn't a hard task.
No,
we
it was
really
not.
loved it.
It was a genuinely really well-made show. So
It
if like for
was.
nothing else other than that, like watch it. You won't need to watch the show in order to enjoy this, hopefully, if we do our job right.
I thought you were about to say you won't need to watch the Dallas Cowboys to enjoy the show, which is true.
Also true. And so we're going to go through the entire series, essentially like key frame by key frame. I went through the whole series after we watched it and screenshotted like key moments with the captions on. So like there's some good like captions that sort of indicate where we are, but also just funny stuff I could catch along the way.
Some of you were texting me while I was at work and it was like pictures and with the subtitles
so
and I was like,
might
man,
be one to pop over to the video for just so you can kind of see what we're talking about, but we'll try to kind of mention what we're talking about and tell the whole story that the show tells as we go through it.
We'll tell it in a way where you can just picture it in your head.
But if you are watching, this will be a much funnier companion piece, I think.
Yeah. If you're watching and you're dying to talk to somebody about it, we're here for you.
Yeah, because we loved it. Okay, so I think we'll just jump into it. We could do more on like the history of the cheerleaders and go more in depth like we might on this podcast, but for this episode, there's so much in this series that we're just going to go through the
also
stuff
we
have
like a tiny bit of that in our Jerry Jones episode,
right, yeah,
which is I think a good companion piece to this.
It is, because it tells about the guy who allows this to happen.
Yes.
Which they barely mentioned.
The man who started it all.
All right, so let's just do it and see how it goes. Episode 1, Auditions Part 1 is where we start. And each episode, I have a slide with like the IMDb description. So Andi, do you want to go ahead and give us that?
Sure. Rookie candidates and seasoned veterans audition for a spot on the team. Some impress the directors with their performances, while others struggle to meet expectations.
Yes.
Ominous.
Okay, first slide is a shot that they show us right at the top. Each year, hundreds of women compete to become Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. Only 36 will make the team. And they're really like strict about that 36.
They really are.
Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, incredible institution.
Yes.
Being shown in this documentary. They actually had a TV show, which we just found out about after watching this, about this same team that ran for like 20 years on CMT. 16 years.
16 seasons or something.
So they've been used to being in the spotlight on TV, but this is like a new look at it.
Yeah, it's like for the past almost 2 decades, they've always had like camera people around recording.
Which you can kind of tell by the way that
everybody acts.
Yeah. Like, especially like the coaches and the leaders.
Oh yeah, Kelly and Judy, the 2 people in charge, like very, very seasoned professionals as far as like media and interviewing, you can tell.
Next up here is an image of the book 2023 DCC rookie finalists. This is to indicate that early on they immediately open and they're looking at candidates for the new 2023 cheerleading squad.
Yes, and they've got a big old binder.
Big old binder of rookie finalists, which are new people. They also have vets, which are like the people who were on the team the year before.
Yes.
But they have to retry out the same way.
And it's like this kind of shocked me. It's a very long audition process. And the vets they don't get in at any like, they don't get any advantage, basically. No. They are doing the exact same steps every single year.
Their only advantage is they've learned the moves before, so they should technically be ready.
Yeah, but that part doesn't even come until you've already gotten, like, they've already made some cuts. Because they have to prepare a full solo routine.
Yeah. And so the first part is they have to actually send like a video of themselves doing like some sort of dance or just some way that shows off what they can do, and then they winnow them down. And that's what you'll see here right when the show opens. Kelly Finglass, the main head of this whole thing.
She is the director of the DCC, and she is, they keep saying, they always put on the chyron, like what class, quote unquote, of DCC they were, like when they retired.
Yeah.
And she was class of 1988. So she cheered for the DCC and then has been the director, like, I think almost ever since.
Yeah. And she's in this scene looking over everybody in the online submissions, saying, like, she's pretty, she can dance, she can't.
Yeah.
Then the next slide is the choreographer and co-runner of all this thing, probably a little below Kelly from the tone of the show, but similar in sort of leadership position. And that's Judy Trammell. And she was also, I think, in that same class.
It looks like she was DCC class of 1983.
Okay, so before that. And yeah, she's describing the open call dance thing after they've passed the online section, where 2,000 girls show up.
It's crazy.
To do a tryout. They talk a lot about, in this part, about how like DCC is more than just dance and cheer. You have to have that it factor, which I think is just a way of being like, you have to be a certain
hot.
amount of hot for us. But it did seem a little bit like you could kind of get by on personality, maybe more in the old days, the way they described it. Than even now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, the it factor is something that's brought up all the time in the performing arts, and like, it does go beyond looks. It's like, I mean, I feel like it's different to every person who's judging it, but like, it's like, do you have that stage presence? Do you engage people? Do you sort of like invite them in with your performance? But like, a lot of it, especially with DCC, is, are you hot?
Yeah. And then right in this sort of flurry of intros, they introduce us to some of the characters. They start doing that throughout, and we'll try to mention them, but there's a lot of them, especially because like there's multiple people trying out and then they get cut, and it's not even 36 people that are on the team. Many of which they don't even show us in the show.
I know, they're like following specific people, and then some of those people get cut, and then they follow certain people the whole way through. And then there's other people that like, you're on like the last episode and you're like, who is that?
Yeah. Yeah. They must have just been boring.
Yeah. They must have not had an interesting traumatic story.
So this is the intro to Victoria, who becomes one of the main characters in this entire show.
Yes.
And this slide, she's saying, making the team was absolutely the best moment of my life.
And I really can't tell if Victoria ended up being the protagonist or the villain in all of this.
Well, her mom is kind of a villain.
Yes.
And that's what comes up in these next few images I grabbed. Basically, this scene is showing Victoria at home, still living with her mom. She's in her 20s, mid-20s. She has been a DCC now for a few years. She's been on the Making the Team show and stuff like that. And she's been cut before. And she's just basically, we'll get to her whole story throughout this, but she's been through it all with this organization and kind of is constantly yearning to be included more.
Yes.
And her mom was a cheerleader, which adds a whole layer, and is best friends with Kelly Fineglass,
who is the
head of it.
She cheered with her.
Yeah. So this is just kind of Victoria saying how much of a part of her life her mom is. Her mom's like giving her massages after practice still. Any thoughts on the Victoria and her mom opening when you first saw it?
This early on, I don't think I was like too alarmed. I was a little bit like, okay, she still lives at home. Like, that's fine. She's in her 20s. Listen, it's hard out there.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
In your 20s and 30s.
Yeah. There's some toxicity right away.
There is toxicity right away because like they both seem like obsessed with DCC and like the history and the legacy. Also, like every single woman, no matter the age in this documentary, is primped to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Like they look their absolute best all the time. And so her mom is like super, super blonde in her like roughly pink shirt. And there's something right away there where you're like, this is being taken very seriously and everyone's done up so much all the time that you're a little bit like, it's just got that like eerie sort of Stepford quality where you're like, there's some tension here. I can't quite tell exactly where it's coming from or what the problem is.
Next up, we get introduced to Kat, just in sort of like a flurry of interviews with alumni and current people.
I love Kat.
And she was awesome. But she is the one who calls out right away in the doc that she's making about as much as a Chick-fil-A worker as a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. They kind of do a little section on how little they actually get paid because it's all about prowess and tradition and honor.
And it's a part-time job. Especially in the beginning, it does seem like they're there constantly all the time. People have other jobs, obviously, that they're maintaining while being on the DCC. it's confusing because you're like, the whole show, they're like, this is so important. This is integral to the organization. This is like a huge honor and a huge sense of responsibility. And then you're like, and they're paid not super well, hourly and part-time. And you're like, wait, what?
Wait, what? The Cowboys have so much money. They're
Right.
all about money and being the best. And
Yeah.
they don't pay them well. I'll have you read a little thing from Vox that I pulled based on like this moment in the show.
Got it. Kat, an alum of the same year, tells the camera that it's been hard to find a job after DCC. In between applying for interviews, Kat explains that pay for a DCC is comparable to a fast food worker. Should one become a DCC, pay is allegedly $15 to $20 per hour, $500 per game day, and up to $75,000 per year, provided the cheerleaders take advantage of professional and event appearances. The lack of pay explains why most of the women trying out for the DCC have day jobs. Some of them are nurses or orthodontists. Meanwhile, the Dallas Cowboys organization is, according to Sports Illustrated, worth $9.2 billion and had a 2022 revenue of $1.05 billion.
Just to really put it in context of how much they're really like kind of ripping off.
Because you're like, $75K a year is not bad, but this caveat of like, they have to take advantage of professional and event appearances. It's like, in order to make that, you probably need to be at their every beck and call.
They probably did that if the person was not only able, but also picked for being in every appearance, which just by the notion of what they kind of described doesn't happen.
Yes. Well, and you'll also see throughout the series, like not everybody is favored in that way, which takes a toll on them emotionally and also probably financially.
Yeah. Next slide that I chose was an image of Charlotte Jones, who quickly becomes the devil.
Yeah, and doesn't she just look like it?
Yeah.
She's so angular. She's so pointy. Like the visual on her immediately, I was like, oh, Cruella de Vil, the villain from Sleeping Beauty. Like she just Maleficent. Like she's just so pointy and shiny and evil looking.
Jerry's daughter. So Jerry's very old, but
it's hard to tell how old she is because of how much work she's had done.
Anyway, they put her in there in this section to chime in and be like, you know, there's a lot of cynicism around pay for NFL cheerleaders, and she tries to do her little spiel about how it's about the Cowboys and helping the community and not about money.
Well, they really highlight at the beginning that the DCC and the Dallas Cowboys are two separate organizations.
Yeah.
And in the documentary, you can tell that the women in charge are trying to present that like, and isn't that amazing? Like this is our own fully female run organization and it's our own thing separate from the Dallas Cowboys. And then you think about it for a second, and they mention like that was done intentionally from the beginning. And you have a little context of Jerry Jones if you listen to our episode, and you're like, oh, this was very purposeful to make sure that the DCC is not getting the money from the Dallas Cowboys.
Even though they are one of the main branding arms of the Cowboys.
Exactly.
And they literally say that their main job is to show a good image of the Cowboys.
Yes.
And they're not technically part of the Cowboys organization.
I know. And the whole documentary, the whole time is like they are integral to the Dallas Cowboys. They are the most recognizable thing. When you think of the Dallas Cowboys, you think of the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders.
Yep.
They haven't changed the uniform since they began because it's so iconic. And yet you're like, they're not technically seeing any of the money that the Dallas Cowboys are bringing in.
And so none of the drama from DCC can be attributed to the Cowboys and vice versa.
Yeah. It's like very obviously protecting the Cowboys as an organization and as a brand, both financially and also like in reputation.
Yep.
And again, like if you have any amount of context about Jerry Jones and what a sack of shit that guy is,
Seriously.
You're like immediately like, oh, these women are touting this as like a good thing of like, we have our own organization. And you're like, no, that was on purpose to make sure that you were always considered like below.
Because if you were part of the Cowboys organization, you could then much easier make the argument that the work you're doing is comparable to a player's.
Right.
For millions of dollars, which they should be getting paid doing this type of physical, talented work.
The athleticism and like you said, the level of talent. I mean, we'll get into it. It's insane.
Yeah. Next up, we get introduced to our number one star of the veterans, Kelsey.
Teacher's pet.
Yep.
She is a pediatric nurse of a child with disabilities, and she works every day from 7:30 to 4:30. And then when she has DCC, then goes to like hours of rehearsal in the evenings.
Yeah.
That is like,
When they showed the scene, it was almost haunting because of how difficult her job looked.
yes.
And then she would have to go do another job after, which she loves, but isn't being paid for, really.
Well, just the amount of hours and that crazy schedule and just the rigor of having to go to like be in an environment that I'm sure is very sort of like humbling and very intense and very emotional, and to then like have to like go to practice or go to a game or whatever performance and just like smile and be hot and dance and like give full energy, and like that's just, it's asking a lot of somebody. But she seems to have reconciled that by like fully buying in to the DCC, which I think is, as a lot of women sort of demonstrate and just like outright say a lot of the time, is kind of the only way to get through.
Then we get introduced to Reese, who is a rookie candidate and is one of the most naive people I've ever seen in a show.
Yes. And thinking about this now, like, because we just saw that image of Kelsey, the documentary is sort of showing you like Kelsey's in her 5th year. She's a 5th year vet. This is going to be her last year. So Kelsey was about to enter auditions, because they still make her audition for her 5th year. And then we're meeting Reese, who we can kind of tell is, I mean, I think Reese is probably going to be a 5-year veteran.
Yeah.
She's probably going to be in like a similar position to Kelsey. She also is, as you said, the most naive person who has ever walked the face of the earth. She is new in the world every day.
Yes. And they show her being incredibly religious. Like
So
you
religious.
could have put this intro next to any cult documentary person who is brainwashed by like the volleyball guy from
from The Vow.
yeah.
Yeah.
It gave off Keith Raniere vibes the way she was talking about Jesus.
The guy from The Vow. Yeah.
But she was like, I do everything for Jesus. I dance for him. I'm hot for him.
Yeah.
Like basically.
Well, yeah. So she talks a lot about how like, basically she's trying to crystallize the thought that like the pressure of like performing and like being a dancer and whatever was fully relieved for her when she realized that her only audience is Jesus.
Very literally.
Very, very literally. Like if you go to her Instagram bio is performing for an audience of one, and the one is capitalized. And you're like, oh boy. This comes up a lot in this documentary, but Reese most primarily, but a lot of the women basically take a lot of comfort in anything that they're dealing with being like, you know what? Jesus.
Yep. It's terrible. Systemic things are wrong against us.
Yes.
Jesus will fix it.
The Reese thing just ends up being, it gave me a lot of cognitive dissonance, because she'll be like, I am dancing for Jesus. Jesus is my audience, and Jesus is going to determine whether or not I become a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. And then you watch her dance and you're like, you are a sexy little Jesus lady.
Yeah, she's really good and independently good at dance without
and she's incredibly good at dance, but it's also like the sort of cognitive dissonance of like, this is all about Jesus and purity and the Lord.
Yeah.
And I am a vessel. And then you like see the dancing and you're like, you're just like a hot, sexy little dancer baby.
So now we're actually getting to the auditions from this year.
The in-person. All these people have made like all of the cuts through the video, virtual, not in-person auditions.
Yeah. And a woman barges in, and almost everyone who works these auditions, works the organization, was a former DCC.
Everybody in that building is a former DCC.
Which adds to the cultiness, because they were all bought in at one point.
Yeah.
And they continued.
It's like on the surface, you're like, oh my God, what a badass organization just run by like powerful women. And that is true. What's also true is that all of these women have been indoctrinated into a cult.
Yes. And so she barges in as everyone's prepping, and she goes, and we're also trying to get the AC fixed. I'm sorry. So like there's no AC in this giant building of nervous people.
All these young women, they're nervous. They're rehearsing their routines. They're stretching. So much hairspray is flying through the air. Like an acrid amount of hairspray is flying through the air. And so like the stress, and you can just see it. You can like cut the tension in the room with a knife. And then this woman comes in and it's like, okay, this group's going to go this time. And by the way, we are working on getting
the AC fixed. Don't worry.
And you're like, everything I just watched was happening in no air
AC?
Conditioning.
Fuck.
Like you could probably, you open your mouth, you can taste Aquanet. Like,
Yeah. Then we meet some of the judges. So Kelly, the head of this thing, brings in a panel of judges from all over Dallas to sort of involve the community, she says. And it's part of her grand system. She has like a whole system. She's like, if these men and women who I bring in from the community have things to say, like, I have a pretty good idea of who will be good.
I mean, on the one hand, you're sort of like, oh, that's nice that she involves the community, because it is, you know, the Dallas Cowboys and the cheerleaders seem to be so important to the community, which they talk about later, a lot of community service stuff. So you're like, on the one hand, that's actually cool that she brings in the community. On the other hand, you're like, why is a meteorologist talking about whether or not someone's a good dancer?
Especially when this is seen, I mean, this is the reason they made the show, as maybe one of the top dance opportunities for the top of the line dancers in our country.
Yes.
And so to have them judged by a meteorologist feels weird.
It's weird. It's just a little weird. So many times when we were watching this, we're like, this is a parallel to the improv community. This is a parallel to the improv community. And in general, just a parallel to all performing arts. There are so few paid opportunities as a dancer, singer, actress, what have you, that are consistent, are fulfilling, and like give you an opportunity to do what you love at the highest level and also pay you. And this is one of those few coveted opportunities. So it almost seems just offensive to be like, I'm sorry, I'm performing for a meteorologist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little like auditioning for Sweeney Todd and auditioning for the janitor who's not Matt Damon.
Or like a pharmacist.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, does the pharmacist know what good vocal tone
He
is?
knows
Like,
how
I don't
to
know.
get me the statins I need. Okay. So this meteorologist's name is Scott Paget, and they show him, and then they show...
God.
This was really funny, and I made a lot of comments on it when it happened.
Randy Steele.
Randy Steele, a guy from the boot factory that makes the Cowboys cheerleader boots, is there judging.
And
he's
this is not the only time we see Randy Steele.
No, just like having Randy, the boot guy, is like, we said, a stand-in for like everyman Joe that's going to be like, these ladies are hot.
Yeah, because at first you're like, oh, Randy the boot guy's there. And you're like, that's a little bit strange. You're like, maybe they're just doing that to like, I don't know, honor him and like, you know, keep up a good relationship with the boot company. And then like some of the comments he makes, you're like, oh, he's just like the designated lech.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's so that Kelly and Judy can be like, oh, this guy's horny for this woman.
Yeah.
Great.
There's something about her that I say yes to every time. And then here's just an overhead shot, because you commented on it when we watched it. It was a cool shot. They shot an overhead shot of the dance floor of people doing individual solo performances, and then they masked it so that it looks like they're all coming in individually. They
basically like showed different dancers on different parts of the floor. I don't know. There were a lot of details. I turned to you a lot of times being like, this documentary is so impressive because the shots that they are getting, you can tell that someone thought about this in advance.
Way ahead,
and wanted this like very artistic, purposeful cinematography. Like they couldn't have on the fly been like, ooh, we got to get somebody like to put like a really good camera, like, I don't know, up in the ceiling of the building. The other thing I wanted to say about this, I don't know where the hell this is. This is somewhere in like the DCC complex.
Yeah.
This is a room that is purpose built for this very thing.
Yeah.
Which is this weird little Miss America pageant. It's like a weird little auditorium where you are performing in your like scant sequined outfit in front of everybody in full lighting.
Yep. And you're in front of the judges, and every single girl trying out is also along the sides.
It's a special kind of hell having to audition in front of other people who are auditioning. It's a special kind of hell. I mean, I've never had to do that in a dance category because I'm not a dancer.
I had to do it in improv all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
You sit in a theater with everybody else in like your audition time session and do your thing.
It's the worst because you're sitting there being like, oh, that person's really good. They're a contender. That person's great. They're a contender. Great, 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 great. And the whole time you're sitting there being like, I'm not this good. I'm not this funny. I'm not going to be able to do this. And then you have to like perform in front of those.
And do improv, which is like supposed to be like made up on the fly. And
how embarrassing for us. What an embarrassing life we've led.
Next slide, we get to introduce to another DCC and her sister.
Oh my God,
this is Caroline and I forget her name.
Anna Kate,
right. And Anna Kate is a young, just out of college student who's auditioning to be a DCC.
rookie, yeah.
And her sister just finished her time there.
Yes, she did her 5 years. She retired at the end of the 2022 season, because this is the 2023 season they're auditioning for. This relationship is very interesting.
Yeah, they put this in here to sort of show, I think, the way that legacy sort of passes down in a family, like in real time, and how hard it is for these girls to get over this right when they finish, because most of her arc, Caroline's, is like a deep
pain
and
both physical and emotional.
Physical, emotional, and just yearning to be back on the team.
She's having a lot of trouble with the fact that like she just finished this experience and now she's like trying to help her sister. There's been no year in between. She went right from like retiring to like, now my sister is moving in with me.
Moves to Dallas, in with her.
Into my studio apartment, and we're sharing a bed, and I am like helping prepare her for this experience while I am like trying to figure out how to let go of this experience. Yeah. It's a lot.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
Next slide here is an older picture of Kelly, the founder of this, and Victoria. Victoria, again, we mentioned, the one that's close to her mom and is real caught up in this whole thing.
She sure is.
This is Victoria telling the story of how like she didn't make the team, was on the old CMT show.
Yes.
And then got accepted finally. And it's a lot of like tough love talk from Kelly in this section about like, yes, I know Victoria's mom and everything like that, but we want to make sure Victoria earns it on her own, and kind of
situation was like hard to watch the entire series because I think at one point Victoria mentions that like Kelly was one of the first people to hold her as a baby, like after her mother did when she was born. So like this woman has effectively been like another mom to her basically, but she's been like bad cop mom because she's also been the one responsible for giving her her dream or not.
It's like that's a good way to put it. Bad cop mom. Like her mom's the one that you can do it. Meanwhile, Kelly is like, no, you can't.
Yeah, she's like, Victoria literally says, she's like, my mom is my best friend. And like every shot of her at home is her and her mom like hanging out, having a good time. Her mom's like filming her TikToks for her. Like they are inseparable. And then she goes to rehearsals where Kelly always gives her this very sort of like, I don't know, flat face, sort of not trying to show any emotion, not trying to like overplay her hand at all.
Very, very weird. Calculated.
And meanwhile, like Victoria's trying to ask her like direct things of like, do you think I'm talented? Do you think I deserve this?
So near the end of the episode, they're like transitioning out of this judge panel section and into the stadium on the field section, which is all part of this one audition day, which starts like early in the morning and goes to like midnight.
I'm like, you didn't have to do it all in one day. You didn't have to. It's they're doing it on purpose, I'm assuming, to like test their mettle, basically, of like, can they handle this?
Because you, when you're performing, have to be going nonstop.
Yeah. So they do their individual routines and then they get them on the field, and like we're already, I don't even know, we're on like hour 8 or 10 of this experience already.
And Christy Scales, who's the Dallas Cowboys sideline reporter, but is also involved in the cheerleader stuff.
She rides the bus with them and talks to them the entire time. Like, I think her role is to like educate the cheerleaders about football, but also every time they show her on the bus, like, it's just so funny. Like they're on the way to the game and I'm like, what? Let them listen to their music or a podcast, or just like take a nap. And you have Christy Scales being like, okay, so if we win this.
Trying to explain the football of it. And they're just like, we have full-time jobs and this.
Also, like a lot of the women on the team seem to already understand everything about football.
She mentions as they go to the field that the way that they watch all the people on the field, the same judges are also sitting in the stadium now, watch on the big boards at the stadium.
The big screens.
Because that's how they're going to be shown on game day. So like that's how they literally view them for the judging. And right as the episode ends, we hear them say they've made their final decisions all in one day. And they're about to announce them and have everybody walk down as they get picked. And the ones who don't have to sit there and stay.
Once again, in front of everybody.
In front of everyone.
And I think I said at one point, can't you just send them an email?
Cool. So that's episode 1.
All right, episode 2, auditions part 2, and this is the IMDb description. Veterans cut from the squad tearfully exit as a new batch of hopefuls battle at training camp for a chance to make the team.
we are shown all the people who make it and don't make it to the next phase. This isn't, you haven't been on the team yet.
No, they're just going to training camp.
Just to training camp. And so they show some of the people that they'd kind of shown throughout the early part of the first episode, getting cut, and everyone in the locker room hugging them and stuff. And this is where we really start to see how much DCC gets into the brains of people and how much it sort of like affects them. And I really related to this in terms of improv. I feel like I had this same exact response.
Yeah.
And I have this image here of one of the girls saying, I wouldn't have changed anything.
I know.
Like, what could I do different? Like immediately after they're like so grateful for the opportunity to get denied. And it's like how they kind of make you feel because even the chance is so worth it.
Yes. I mean, and this is one of the veterans who she had already performed with DCC and then got cut.
Yeah.
And will not, I mean, I guess she can try again next year, but you know, this whole documentary, they talk about like what a sisterhood this is. And I believe it because I'm sure all these women bond with each other super strongly because they are under insane duress, which is a great bonding mechanism. And so you have somebody who like you danced with for a whole season, became super close friends with, and then you're watching them get cut and it's really uncomfortable. And also like the women in the locker room are like crying and they're like trying to say to the rookies, like, we are excited for you. It's just hard for us because like some of our friends are not continuing on with us. It just seems very sad and uncomfortable.
Yeah. And then there's a slate that says current roster, 16 rookies, 31 vets. And then we get a little character moment with Reese showing her naivety. She goes to a Starbucks. She's never been to one. She's never had coffee. She's never ordered anything at Starbucks for herself or anyone. And she gets a strawberry acai refresher and thinks it's the most insane thing in the world. It's very kind of cute, but also, what?
I know. You're like, where did you come from, you little innocent baby?
And where she came from was University of Alabama. Cheerleading team right into this.
Just watching her, I've never been to a Starbucks. The girls had to tell me what to order. Like, oh my God, Reese.
Next up is a shot of the welcome clap line. And there was a funny doc moment where the documentary camera operator or whatever is like, wait, what's this? And then they have to be like, this is our welcome in clap line. And they have a whole procedure for it, of course. And it's all the old veterans who are like in the area.
Yep, in their sparkly t-shirts.
And sparkly tees with pom-poms, standing in the Cowboys facility in a big like welcome double-sided line.
Yep.
A walkout style for...
God, they're all wearing, I mean, I know they're purposely all wearing the same outfit, but like they're all in their sparkly t-shirts and then black pants. And then look at all the different like... middle-aged lady wedge sandals that everyone's wearing.
And they're welcoming all the new cheerleaders.
Yep,
to
including
the
there's Victoria's mom smiling broadly in the middle.
Yeah. And then they have them all in the Cowboys practice lecture hall, which is the thing they do at football stadiums now.
I was about to say, like, this is the thing that reminded me the most of watching like Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
When they're in, it looks like a university, a nice university lecture hall.
Yeah, this was like all Wisconsin lecture halls look like this. We get a little welcome to the rookies. And there's one who became kind of a favorite of ours. Anisha. And she's a orthodontist or a dentist.
She's an orthodontist, yeah.
In her day job. And then good enough to be on the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
Yeah, I mean, she is such a rock star. She is an orthodontist. She had previously danced on the Golden State Warriors basketball dance team, and she's 31, which I remember. The only reason I specifically remember that is because they made a lot of comments while they were watching her dance of like, she's 31?
Yeah.
She doesn't look 31. I can't believe she can dance like that at 31. And meanwhile, like, I'm about to turn 35 sitting there being like, should I just walk into the lake? Like, should I just walk into Lake Michigan?
Go out there for one of those early morning coffee things and just never come back.
Just never return. I belong to the sea now because I'm 35.
Next up, we have one of the rookies and stuff saying and talking about how we never know when cuts are going to happen, because that's another thing they do for control is once they're in training camp, cuts can happen after any practice or at any point during the middle of practice. They can just pull you aside and be like, we want to let you go. And they say the reason for this is we just don't want to lead people on any longer. Which, fine. But like, why did you bring them all the way here?
Again, what about an email?
Yeah.
I just, You could just send them home for the night, let
Yeah.
them rehydrate, eat some dinner, and then when they're at home alone in their comfortable clothing after a shower, they can get a disappointing email. Rather than the way they do it, which is you've just done 18 minutes of the Thunderstruck dance, and then they're like, Lauren, can we see you in the office? And then all the girls are just like, maybe it's just a talk. Maybe it's just a conversation. Maybe they're just going to give you some notes. And then you're like, they're not going to give her notes. She's going home.
Yeah.
Like,
Then we see more struggles of Victoria. She's a loner in the training camp session.
God, this picture.
Yeah. Kelly and Judy and everyone are talking about how Victoria needs to connect more with her teammates, especially knowing that they had other seasons before this. I was sort of thinking like, oh, they just have a grudge against her. They've picked this a long time ago, and now it just feels like there's no way she can cut through with any of these people.
Yeah, it's like, and we don't have enough information to know, like, is this coming from Victoria or is it mainly coming from Kelly and Judy? It feels like it's mainly coming from Kelly and Judy. Like, this image that we're looking at is like poor Victoria. She's standing in the middle of a crowd of like vets and rookies, and she's just sort of like smiling, like looking at nobody, and then like everybody else around her is like talking to the other people on the team. And yeah, Victoria was like really puzzling because like from the very beginning you were like, I don't know, I feel like Kelly and Judy just hate her.
Yeah.
And like Victoria, the whole series is like, I feel like they hate me. And meanwhile, Kelly and Judy are both being like, no, we don't hate you. And all the other women are like, of course they don't hate you.
Yeah.
But like you're watching and you're like, no, they hate her.
Yeah, they do. They've decided that. And then we get some concerns with some of the people that come up throughout the show. There's like, it cuts to a scene of Kelly talking with Judy about Victoria, I think in this case, but other people too, about how they're not fueling themselves. We make sure that they're just getting the right amount of energy.
You just got to have the right intake. They
Which is
never
food.
ever say eat food.
Eat food. They never say, they don't want to ever be caught suggesting someone eat food and or eating anything.
Yes. You need to make sure you're fueling
Fuel.
yourself and that you're managing your intake.
And I just attached a little clip here that'll have you read
Oh,
from
sure.
the Globe and Mail.
This is from an article written by Joanna Schneller called The Secret Feminism of Netflix's Dallas Cheerleaders docuseries, America's Sweethearts. Quote, the most complicit culprit is Finglass, who has an unmovable idea of what a DCC is. Basically, what AI would proffer if you asked it for, quote, pretty American girl. Flat stomach, shapely chest and bum, but not too va-va-voom. Symmetrical face, long bouncy hair, gleaming teeth, biddable attitude. To every request or critique, the cheerleaders are allowed one reply. Yes, ma'am. Studying their features in extreme close-up, not unlike a magnifying mirror, Finglass tells one candidate her eyebrows are too big, orders another to remove the mascara from her lower lashes, demands full makeup and flowing hair even during training, and cuts the image of one from a kickline photo because, quote, her face is weird, i.e. she's showing exertion. She has a million euphemisms for not pretty enough. Your energy's too low. Your kicks aren't high enough, and a clear preference for white Christians. Of the 36 girls who make the squad, even veterans must try out a new each year. 5 are black, and the rest present as white. If there are any Asians, South Asians, Native Americans, or Latinas, they are not featured in the series.
So that's a little bit ahead of where we are. But
Yes.
yeah, I just thought it was good to mention some critiques.
No, we noticed immediately because like they cut 2 women of color at once during training camp. And it felt bad.
Yeah.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they had been giving both of those women notes about like, your kicks aren't high enough. They were giving them notes that just felt explicitly racist because it was just sort of like, the feedback was like, you are not where we want you to be, and we don't think that we have enough time to get you where we want you to be. And it just felt sort of very like, not very thinly veiled, like you are not what we're looking for, and we're not gonna be able to make you what we're looking for. And you're like, I wonder why.
Yeah. Yep. Then we get another Reese moment where she introduces us to her fiance named Will.
Oh my God.
And how they met in college. So Will was the #1 Alabama basketball fan, and he's just a dude. So it's this like very, very attractive cheerleader, very naive though, meets Will, this guy who's a major Alabama basketball fan. They were in the same church group, and immediately she was like, the first boy I meet is going to be my husband. That's what I asked God, and that's what happened. So
yes.
I guess that's what happened. So
yes.
we get to meet Will, and he's kind of funny.
He seems like a really nice guy. And I struggle to talk about this because I don't want to sound mean, but it's like you meet Reese and you're like, what a gorgeous, conventionally attractive, incredible dancer. And she keeps talking about her fiance, Will, and you're imagining something in your head.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Because you're like, ooh, what person sort of goes with this this person?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see Will and you're like, oh, he must be so nice.
Yeah.
And he does seem really nice, honestly.
Next up, they show the cuts of some of the people, and then we get a shot of Victoria at home with her mom making her lunch. This is the lunch of a DCC, and it's some rice cakes and watermelon.
I was about to say making is sort of an interesting word, and lunch is also an interesting choice of word because it's a stack of rice cakes, a cheese stick, and then like I don't remember what. Yeah,
a bunch of watermelon. And she's like, "Here's your lunch." And there's like a moment where she's asking Victoria like where she wants to eat and stuff like that. And you can tell like this is not for cameras type of talk because Victoria's like, "Mom, stop!" Like she's like embarrassed of how controlling her mom is of her like diet and life.
Yeah, it's a weird moment. Like Victoria snaps at her mom, probably because she's just hungry.
Yeah. I'm gonna have you read a little bit more from that Vox article,
sure,
because there was another sort of moment.
Victoria's legacy affords her some protection, but also yokes her to a bad situation that clearly makes her feel terrible about herself. Kelly and Judy tell Victoria in so many ways that not only does her personality pale in comparison to her mother, but that she also needs to lose weight. Quote, I think it's harder for girls not to just want to starve themselves, Victoria says in a confessional, as the camera shows Victoria eating a lunch that consists of a bowl of watermelon, 3 or so slices of turkey sandwich meat, and 2 rice cakes. Victoria and other DCC vets and alums explain that the uniform they wear, particularly the hot pants, are tailored to their bodies and aren't resized. That means veterans, especially 4- and 5-time returning stalwarts, have to keep their bodies the same size over the course of years. When Victoria looks at the uniform, she says she thinks, oh man, I need to lose at least 3 pounds. It is heavily indicated that she took time off to get healthy after a bout with disordered eating. This whole section is crazy because they cut to some old clips from the CMT reality show where Kelly is directly telling Victoria that her stomach like looks flabby. Mm-hmm. And then mixed with that is like present day Kelly being like, Victoria, you look low energy. You need to be like fueling yourself. Yep. And you're like, you are the reason she has an eating disorder. You are bad cop mommy. Yep. Okay. You are very close with this woman. You've been close with this woman her entire life. She looks up to you and also is desperate to be liked by you and to impress you. You told her when you rejected her from the thing she wanted most in life that one of the reasons was because her stomach was too jiggly.
So what do you think
she's going to do? What do you think is going to happen?
Good God.
Maybe she will, of course she's going to be low energy. She's not eating because you told her not to eat. Oh, it makes me so crazy. Okay.
They show the uniform fitting section.
Oh, yes.
This is like a big, they cut some of the girls before the uniform fitting because they were like, well, we don't want to have them see that and think that they might make it.
Yeah.
So that's why they cut the 2 black girls.
Well, because they also, a lot of the women in their interviews are like, the first time you put on that DCC uniform, it is like the best thing that's ever happened to you. And you're like, oh boy. I think this was also maybe a quote from Kat.
Oh, yeah.
Like one of the alumni, because Kat, God bless her, she's out of DCC now and she says whatever the hell she wants, which is amazing because she's one of the only sources of actual truth in this documentary. And I think this is a quote from her saying, I think that torso proportion is a big thing because she's really emphasizing, I remember here, a lot of the reasons people get cut are literally just because of what their body naturally looks like, not even talking about weight.
Yeah.
you have a longer torso than they want, or you have a shorter torso
and they
than
all
they
need
want.
to look uniform because they're performing this
Yes.
very, uniform.
They need to look uniform, and yet every single one of them, they claim, has to like sparkle individually.
In their own way, yeah.
It's wild.
Episode 3.
Candidates receive makeovers, then learn the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders' iconic dance routine. An NFL Hall of Famer motivates them before another round of cuts.
Oh, God, yeah.
I forgot about this.
So we open on Mary Kate and Caroline.
Anna Kate and Caroline.
Anna Kate and Caroline.
See, you're having one of the main problems that Kelly and Judy had with Anna Kate, which is that she's a little bit forgettable.
Oh, no. And they're sleeping in the same bed at Caroline's.
Yes.
Because, again, that's her sister that used to be a DCC.
Also, shout out to the documentarians who were like, we're going to put a camera on your ceiling and just like film you guys talking while you're getting ready for bed. Honestly, I think this was a really smart move because I feel like you've put them in a space where they can actually have like a pretty realistic, intimate conversation, which I think is difficult in a documentary setting, especially a documentary setting with a bunch of women who have been media trained within an inch of their lives.
Yeah. So her sister's talking about how she just doesn't feel like she's clicking with Kelly and Judy, and is like having a crisis to her sister. Like, is it my personality? And as you watch it, you're just like, oh my God, no, it's not any of the things. It's just them. It's you. It's not you.
It's what you're watching. This whole documentary, you're watching some of the most talented and beautiful women you've ever seen in your life just completely spin out and second guess literally every aspect of who they are.
Yeah. They show Caroline at a DCC like alumni event.
Oh, it was like their end of year banquet.
End of year banquet, right at the top of this. And she comes in. This is the first time you see that she's limping in with 2 canes.
She's got crutches, yeah.
Because, as you'll find out in a little bit, some of the moves they do really hurt your hips.
Yeah.
And so she needed surgery as soon as she was done, like saving essentially surgery.
Yes. It's very harrowing to see her at this banquet that's supposed to be like honoring her. And also like she walks up to receive her like Veteran of the Year award because she was Kelly and Judy's like special little girl before Kelsey was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she comes in on crutches and you're like, wait a second, what happened?
They didn't show that yet.
Yep.
Then we get a slide that says current roster, 28 vets, 14 rookies.
And it's right in front of Deborah, the wig model. Look, this weird prosthetic.
Oh, yeah.
Is this what they want all the cheerleaders
that's what
to
they
look
want.
like?
Then they show the hair day, the makeover day.
Yep.
So part of the process, as they see you in training camp, is to remake your look in case that was the problem. But let's see if we can change your hair color first and if that fixes everything, which in some cases seems to.
Yeah.
And I forget, what's this girl's name?
So this is Kelly, who is a rookie auditioner from Weehawken, New Jersey. One of the few people they highlight who is not from
The
South. And Kelly came in with blonde hair that she had dyed. Like, I think she's a natural brunette, but she had kept her hair blonde by choice because that's what she liked, what she looked like.
Yeah.
Let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And then Kelly and Judy were like, that's wrong. You should be a brunette.
You're a redhead, basically.
Yeah, you're like
reddish.
a reddish brunette. And so this was interesting because this is like a direct parallel to the Legally Blonde reality show that we watched. I didn't show you this because I didn't get there. Once they got to like the final 3 or 4 women, they dyed the hair of any
all blonde to make,
they made them all blonde. And what was really funny about it was like the women who had to go blonde weren't necessarily excited about it because they didn't feel there was a reason they hadn't already done it. They didn't want to. And then the other women who were naturally blonde or had already had dyed blonde hair got like really nervous because they were like, well, now the playing field's like really level. And you're like,
the reason.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the same thing. It's like when you're in an industry or like the iconic role of Elle Woods or the iconic role of a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader, what you look like is huge. And like Kelly and Judy, for all their experience and all of their like acquired wisdom over the years, really can't seem to get past appearances a lot of the time.
No.
So like this is actually pretty crucial for people.
And this is where they introduce us next to Thunderstruck.
Yes.
Which is a performance that Kelly made back when she was a cheerleader to the song of Thunderstruck. It's a very demanding dance routine to the entire song. And
it's a long song.
It's how they open the Cowboys games with the cheerleaders coming out. And then like, it's hard to describe, but they essentially like in formation, like sprint out in these like military-esque lines.
Yeah, they have to like stay in line, but also like haul ass.
Yeah.
And cover. I mean, like when you're watching football, the biggest thing is like you have to pick up yards, right? Like the women are doing that, where they're like, you need to make sure you get to this next yard line in this many paces while looking hot.
Because everything needs to be together.
Yeah, everything has to be regimented.
Behind.
So like the first part is this big like walkout or this sprint out onto the field, and then they do this dance, and then there's a kick line sequence. It's like the women describe it as like it's just like a nonstop like workout for like the length of the song.
And we hear from some of them about this. This is a Kelsey, who's like, again, the #1 veteran candidate.
Yes.
Talking about the fundamental nature of Thunderstruck to DCC. And Reese also talking about how it's the most iconic dance that she can ever think of. But she's also never heard of Starbucks. So how many dances?
It's all
does
relative.
Reese really know?
Like iconic dances I can think of is like the Macarena.
Yeah.
But I've been to Starbucks a bunch, so I've lived.
Let's see if I can think of a dance.
Yeah, what's an iconic dance to you?
There's the Macarena. There's Mambo. No, Mambo number 5 doesn't have a dance. It should.
It should. I don't know why it doesn't.
Let's see. Isn't there like the limbo?
All right, we need to move on because this is not your ministry
I
in the
don't know
world.
TikTok dances. I don't know anything. And then
oh boy,
we have a slide about the jump splits. And this is a big thing they introduce to us after just having shown Caroline, the veteran, with her hips blown out.
Yep.
And the reason for that is this move.
The jump splits.
Which is something they say is essential to the performance. It is very cool. What it is they do a kick line with their arms linked.
Very like classic Rockette style
And then
kick
at
line.
the very end, on an 8 count, they all drop into a split.
Yeah, they go from like doing a kick into landing into a full split.
And I think I was mentioning this to you. Isn't that a death drop in drag?
Yes.
Essentially just landing in a full split.
Yeah. Well, not even, I don't even know if it's a full split in drag. I'm not sure. Jim surprised me. I was like in the middle of washing my face and Jim was like, isn't like the split kick basically just a death drop? And I was like, excuse me, who has entered this apartment and is speaking to me about this? This slide of Judy talking about the jump split is actually the most harrowing thing, because she literally goes, it takes a lot of energy. It does hurt some of them a little bit.
Yeah.
Because she's talking about how like this is the night they're going to work on jump splits and some of the girls are nervous. And she literally is just like, yeah, it hurts some of them. It physically hurts some of them.
Yeah.
You're like, what?
And then here's an image of them having just landed.
Yeah.
In the jump split.
I mean, I think people can understand this because just even looking at this picture, you're like, Jesus Christ, ow. To be able to do a split, like a full split, you have to be incredibly flexible. It takes years of like just stretching to be able to do that. To be able to kick that high that you're almost like hitting your nose with your knee. Mm-hmm. And then to like, I don't know, just the aerodynamics on like going from that into a full split. Like it's just, thank God all these women are like lightweight because they don't eat, because it does look like it would just like destroy your body. Yeah.
And then a shot they cut back to of Caroline on her couch talking about her surgery.
Wearing a medical boot.
in her hips.
Yes.
Like hip surgery from that.
Yeah. It says the surgeon was like, you've got to get this hip operated on. And when she's talking about this prior to her final season. Like, I remember she was saying, like, after 3 or 4 seasons.
She did most of the last season with.
Yes. Like, her doctor was like, you shouldn't do another season. And she was like, I want to do one more season before I get surgery. I want to do my last final season. So she like, her hip was already destroyed and then she fully destroyed it more knowingly. Yeah. And then Emmett Smith.
Yeah. Emmett Smith, the former Cowboy legend, comes in and they bring him in, and maybe it was just for the Netflix show to have like some Cowboys.
I think so.
It was like hey, he's going to meet the team and give you some words of advice about how to make the team or whatever.
What's funny is like, they're talking to Emmett Smith before he goes in. Kelly said, like, we want you to, like, let us know, like, what you see, like, when you're watching them, like, whether or not anybody stands out. And Emmett Smith, like, says something to the effect of, like, I don't want to be responsible for, like, crushing somebody's dream.
Yeah, he basically said, I don't know anything about that. Like, it was actually awesome. He was like, I don't know anything about this. You guys can pick that. I'm not going to make any way in dancing.
I really appreciated that because it was like, as we said in the beginning with the boot guy and the meteorologist, like, there are certain people that they call upon who are like, oh, yeah, this is not my role in life, but I will gladly
chiming in.
I will gladly chime in and potentially like ruin a young woman's life. And then Emmett Smith's like, I don't want any part of that.
Yeah. 9 days until first game.
Yes.
And this is where they cut Anisha. And they are pretty rude to her. They're
are.
like, you cannot do the kick lines. Your feet are all over the place. And I feel like she describes in detail a perfect line and then says, and then if you were in it, your feet would be dangling. And it's like, oh my God, you didn't need to say it that way.
No, and what's especially upsetting about this is the night that Anisha hurts her foot while she's doing the kick line.
Yeah.
So like,
it may have just been from injury that she was noticing.
It's very possible. Like, I think part of what happened is she injured her foot and they were like, okay, well, you're going to have to like recover from this injury and we only have 9 days. So like, we need to cut you. Because up until this point, they had been very excited
Super
about
high
her.
on Anisha.
Yes.
So we don't exactly know.
And she was, as far as like you can tell, the only South Asian person of South Asian descent, which would be really exciting for the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, I would imagine, if they had the right mindset.
Yeah. Then they cut Kelly, who we just saw change her hair color to brunette, and she has one of the more pained responses where she's like, is there any hope for me down the line? And again, I totally relate to it because I've sat across from improvisers.
You were about to say a name. Don't do it.
I really have no respect for, and sat in front of them and was sort of told why I wasn't good enough. And then at the time, I remember being like, is there anything I can do?
Yep.
And like, you just don't realize you're in a thing. You're in the wrong place.
When you email name redacted for your audition notes.
Yeah.
After, because they say at the audition, like, if you don't make it, like, email for notes. And so you're like, thank you for not giving me what I wanted and hoped and dreamed for. Could you please tell me ways in which I totally fucking suck and need to improve?
And then they reply.
Well, no, or they don't. Yeah.
Or they don't. Yeah.
More likely they don't.
They don't.
Or they reply and you're like, cool, that's what I thought. I thought I sucked. That's good. Good to know. Good to know I sucked. Kelly is crying. She's very upset. I mean, they laid the groundwork that people who don't make it tend to just like stay in Dallas and like,
which was sad to me.
Oh yes, because there was that woman that they cut earlier on. She had been working in like medical device sales from home and like just having this sort of like soulless experience during the day, like calling people about like urology medical supplies. And then she's been taking dance classes. Like people frame their entire year around auditioning for this again. And you can just tell that like Kelly's totally going to be one of those people. Yeah.
She was like, they changed my hair and I'm just going to keep it a whole year until I try out again. And I was like, no,
she's on the phone with her mother crying. And she's like, I'm going to like be home soon. And she's like, I'm keeping my hair. I'm going to be exactly the way they want me for next year. If this is what they want. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
All right. Episode 4.
God Loves Dallas.
He sure does. Candidates showcase their signature boots and make final preparations during training camp before the selection of the final roster.
And they open on a big religious ceremony from some local
mega church
that takes all your money for God. And they're taking a lot of the cheerleaders' money for God. They show how a lot of the cheerleaders are involved in these mega churches in Dallas.
Yes.
They didn't really go too deep into that, but they just show you how like faith-based a lot of the people are. Yeah,
I don't remember specifically like if we heard from any individual cheerleaders during that section, but these women are under an insane amount of stress. They're holding themselves to an insanely high standard. And a lot of the issues that they deal with mentally, emotionally, physically, rather than sort of like unpacking that and like going to therapy or maybe just being like, I'm doing a great job.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm just going to give it over to Jesus and see if that's the answer. And it's like, no.
And then they cut to Charlotte Jones talking about her God, her dad, Jerry Jones,
Oh, God.
and talking about how the whole organization and the cheerleaders and everyone is just there to create the vision that he espouses for us.
Mm-hmm.
I think the parallels between that and Jesus are pretty straightforward in how they planned this doc, showing her talk about her dad and as like their Jesus.
Oh, Randy, the designated lech and boot man, comes back.
Again, he seems like a nice enough guy, but
I'm sure he's fine.
He's like commenting on how all the girls are walking in their boots.
It's the circumstances are just not great, like regardless of whether or not Randy's a nice guy. I remember he comes in and he's like, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleader boots are unlike any other boot you're ever going to find. And it's like, well, okay.
Then we have a whole section here on them reminding us that we only take 36.
Mm-hmm.
And then Victoria. This is actually where they showed
this is
the
where
clips from Making the Team, the show we've mentioned a couple times.
The country CMT show.
Yeah. And they're going through Victoria's past and how she's struggled.
And her eye makeup is running all over the place because she's crying so hard.
She's talking and she's like honest for the first time, where she says she's like, oh no, I'm being really honest, like for the documentary, and it talks about having depression and eating disorders because of that. So she's well aware of like what's causing those for her.
Yes.
It's like this organization, but she still has to do it. And she talks about how she's lonely again, and she goes to practice and could walk away without talking to anyone, and the whole time thinking how she needs to be talking to people to impress Kelly.
Yeah, which is, it's just so interesting because the other half of this is like, the DCC really seems to have like the same kind of like social atmosphere and hierarchy of a sorority. Like you talked about this a lot, having been in Greek life. Like in Greek life, you're essentially just auditioning to have a group of friends, basically. And that's like a big part of it for these women is like, obviously they want to showcase their talent and dance and like be Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, but they also like bond so much and become such close friends. And they say like, this is the most fun you're ever going to have in your life. And like, it's for these women, it's like, if you're in your early 20s and physically able to do it, like this is like a really fun opportunity. And it's got that same sort of like sorority, like how you interact with the other women seems to also influence the decisions. And poor Victoria is just like not able to connect. Yeah.
Then one of the dancers' moms, or the ones that's trying out, talks a little bit about how she sort of worries about men goggling over her daughter if she makes it.
Fair concern.
I was like, yeah.
It's a fair concern.
Another shot of the devil himself, Jerry Jones, talking about how they have a very strong family base. And I took this shot because I remember you mentioned his thumb grandsons.
Yeah, they do look like little thumbs.
Who are also part of the organization.
Yep. The whole organization is just the Jones family. Oh, this cursed moment. I just saw this image and I know exactly what this is.
So this is right before they're making the final cuts. They're talking again about, hey, maybe we could go up to 37 or 38 cheerleaders, have a couple alternates. And Charlotte Jones, whether it's for the show or she's just also this bad, is like, no, we're going to cut some people and some won't be happy about it and some will. And she's just like insisting they cut it to 36.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you're like, why wouldn't you want to have subs just in case, I don't know, any large amount of things could come up? COVID's still a thing. There are other illnesses. Obviously, people can get injured doing what they're doing. So it just seems...
The fact that you wouldn't have one, especially from like a performing arts person like you.
Yeah.
Like, you would always have alternates.
You always have understudies. Now, I mean, in the performing arts, there's larger conversations about like how badly understudies are paid and treated and they're not given enough preparation time. So like whatever, but like you should have some alternates. And Charlotte Jones is like, she shuts it down. She's like, no. And it's probably just because she doesn't want to pay 2 more people, honestly.
Oh, for sure. And then she ends the scene by saying, Kelly goes, it's going to be really hard to cut some of these people, especially if it's like a veteran or whatever. And she goes, you actually have to have the easiest conversation. There's 36 spots. And I'm like, oh my God. That's literally why she's asking you, is for some sort of support on like the emotional difficulty of having to deliver these messages. And Charlotte Jones is just the one to be like, nope.
Kelly is literally saying like, what reason do I give them for cutting them? Because Kelly is always locked and loaded with some sort of like vague but specific enough reason why people get cut. And she was like, what conversation do I have? And Charlotte, you have the easiest conversation. you say there's 36 spots and we have more than 36 people. You have the easiest conversation. And I'm like, maybe easy for you, a fire-breathing demon. Yeah. Like, maybe it's easy for you to sit across from a crying young woman and be like, no, move on with your life.
My Botox makes it so I don't need to care.
Yeah. I got Botox in the brain.
Yeah. Then we got Kelly saying, right after this whole thing, they're all talking about how she goes, and who doesn't know how to drive to Arlington? And nobody raises their hands. And she said, well, it's really hard. It's going to be crowded in traffic for the first preseason game. All right, everybody, have a good night's sleep. And I just need Charlie and Ari to stay back. She calls out amongst everybody 2 people that need to stay back, obviously to get cut. And again, don't need to do it then. Pull them aside. Send them an email. They do that, and then this is where like Kelsey gathers them around and is like, it could be just a meeting. It's just a meeting. It could be just a meeting. It may not be. And it's like, no, you know what it is.
I guarantee you Kelly and Judy probably pulled Kelsey aside and they were like, every time we call somebody to fire them, please just reiterate that it could be just a meeting.
Then this is really painful because these people have made it the furthest before getting cut. This is Ari, and she was cut because she's too short.
Yep.
Which they didn't tell her beforehand.
I know, and they have that conversation with Charlotte Jones where they're like, should we maybe set like a height limit so that we're avoiding doing this?
Yeah. And she goes, maybe that's something to think about. Yeah. It's like, you haven't thought about it? This has been going on since
I mean, the Rockettes have like a height requirement.
I'm sure they
do. Always have.
I mean, it's definitely uncomfortable to be like, you can't audition for this if your body isn't just naturally a certain way. But also you're like, maybe that's better than leading somebody on for a really long time only to like completely break their heart and have them have to reconsider whether or not they should uproot their entire life again.
Yeah. And then this is just a shot of the handler.
Yes.
They have, again, a former DCC employed, or maybe she's just volunteering.
I think she's employed.
To sit with everyone as they get cut. Her main job is to just be like a counselor for people as they get cut, because it's such a brutal process they've made that they literally need like a liaison to get them out of the building.
Yes.
I also think, they didn't mention this, that this is here to protect the Cowboys.
Oh, 100%.
So they have her there to basically, if someone wants to do something in the office, yell at somebody, even go down the hall and get a word in.
Yeah.
She probably holds them back.
Well, and at the very least, she like cuts the tension in the moment where like this young woman is crying. Kelly and Judy are sitting there awkwardly being like, we've said all that we can say, which is a bunch of like vagaries.
Yeah.
And then what did they call her? Sharpie or something? Like her last name's Sharp, and I think they call her Sharpie. And then all of a sudden, from the background in like a leather armchair pops up this woman, and you're like, oh, she was there the whole time.
Waiting to walk them out.
I know. And she always is like, and my job is to be there so that like I stay with them right until they're out of the building. And I kept thinking in my head, like, if this were me getting cut, I would actually want this woman to fucking leave. I would want to be by myself. I don't want this like woman around who's like fake momming me just to try and like peacefully get me out of the building. I feel like I would be the bitch person that would be like, can you please get the fuck out of here so I can get changed and go home? I really don't want to talk to you.
Yeah. And then this is Reese and Charlie, who just got cut.
Friends because they were living together in a hotel.
And I looked, and she was in her wedding. Charlie was in the bachelorette party.
Oh, that's sweet. I love that. Now, yeah, because like the thing we haven't mentioned yet is that like the people who already live in Dallas, whether or not they're veterans or rookies, obviously live at their homes. But the people who are from out of town, I'm assuming the organization puts them up. Hopefully, question mark.
It was unclear to me.
It was unclear.
They might have all been staying at the Gaylord Texan on their own dime.
Yeah.
which I guarantee you is thousands of dollars a night.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. So like Charlie and Reese were basically living together in this hotel. They're both young women who I think just graduated college, and they met and became really close friends. And Charlie gets cut, and it's really sad.
Yeah. And then we get the big congratulations on the video board after they've ushered out the last to get cut.
It's got to be really awkward leaving practice that night, knowing like there's 38 of us. 2 people just got called into the death office.
And yeah.
And so then, you're like going home in your car being like, I made the team.
Yeah, I must have. Yeah. And then Kelly does a joke that doesn't feel like a joke right at the end of the episode, where she goes, my tone's going to change from this to this. And she gets really mean. And they all laugh.
They all laugh because what else are you going to do in that situation where you're like, oh, I've just signed myself up to be abused for a year. Great. Episode 5, Sparkle.
Sparkle. This is where the series actually gets better. When I thought it was going to like get worse because they'd already done the auditions, but I kind of liked the part where they actually follow the team a little bit.
I know. And it's nice that you're just like seeing women have some relief from this like horrible, because again, training camp seemingly, I think, is like every night for like a couple weeks. It seemed like.
Yeah, it was long.
And like, again, these people are doing their full-time jobs. Like Anisha was tending to people's teeth at a very high level.
Putting those little braces loops in.
Yeah, getting your braces loop color changed, and then she like goes to, I don't know, whatever.
They open this episode taking cameo shots. So one big thing they really emphasize in the whole show is just how much the Cowboys cheerleaders are like part of the branding and part of the whole look of the Cowboys. Again, why they should be paid a ton, but aren't. And they just show them during all this like sort of press stuff. And these are the photos that will like represent them all around the stadium and in all media for the whole year. So it's like their one chance to get a perfect photo in their uniform. And so that's how the episode starts. Even in this process, there's a lot of toxic like, should I change this little thing about me? It's like they look perfect, but Kelly has little nitpicks.
Oh, yes.
I put this in here for you.
Oh, my God.
Kelly mentions that her husband's Jewish.
Yes.
And that she puts 18 flowers around her dog's grave.
Because 18 means life. I laughed really hard at this because I was just like, okay.
Because they're trying to show Kelly like her softer side.
They are.
At home. And it never really
fully translates.
For me.
Yeah, they're trying to show her softer side, but also like Kelly seemed to be like, look, I have a dead dog. And also like, it's not all like toxic Christianity. My husband's Jewish. And like, she's really like working to try and sort of like humanize herself, basically. Like she's in her rollers. Yeah. She's not like fully done up yet. She's like doing all of her like prep work at home. I'm sure she has her own battles internally that she is fighting.
But she's definitely adding a lot to the battles of other people.
She sure is.
Then we sort of show the day where the cheerleaders get introduced and their families all come to the locker room and see their new photos that were taken above their lockers, and they're all in their uniforms.
I appreciated that they had a designated day or moment for this, because they were like, people are going to want pictures with their family members, pictures in the locker room. Like, I do appreciate that they have some of this folded in of like, this does mean a lot to people, so we do need to honor that.
Yeah.
Very few and far between.
Yeah, it is nice they had a day.
Yeah.
But then we get one of the dads, Anna Kate and Caroline's dad, Caroline, the one that was just in, talking about how they look for superstar tendencies in that organization. And that's what my daughters are. Like, basically, like, I have hot daughters. It just felt very weird way to sort of own them.
You're like, okay, John, thanks so much.
Then we meet Nate, who is Kelsey's boyfriend.
Yes.
And he is giving her flowers in the locker room, and Kelsey sort of talks about her relationship, I think, here.
Yeah, so Kelsey is so interesting to me because like she's the most seasoned person on the team, and she's definitely Kelly and Judy's favorite at the moment. She's like the favored special lady, and it's clear that she's going to make the team. Like, there's no question. And she's like a leader among the rookies and the veterans. And she talks a lot about how, like in this specific slide, it says it's her saying like what's important and what doesn't really matter. And she's talking about how her job as a pediatric nurse has sort of given her that clarity. And I'm sure that it has, because I feel like when you work a job like that all day, even though it's grueling and exhausting, you're probably able to sort of separate your emotions from how insane DCC is, because you're like, this is like of such little consequence in the grand scheme of life. And it villainizes her slightly, because you're like, she is doing her best to act as like a mediator between the women and Kelly and Judy. So she's effectively working for them. Mm-hmm. Like, you're working for the devil, but you have this sort of like overall kind of calm, cold, aloof attitude. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And she talks more about her boyfriend and how he was pursuing acting, which got a good laugh out of us.
Oh, it did, because he was a guy who was just like, I want to go to LA and I want to try acting. And like, he's good enough looking that like it worked out a little bit.
Yeah.
He was in, oh yes, looks like you have a screenshot of this. Love at First Like.
Which is like a super, super B movie. He was in a bunch of other little parts as like B movie type parts.
Yeah.
I think he had like a nude role on an HBO show.
Yes.
That he could get.
Yes.
Stuff like that. Then we got Victoria sort of trying to define herself in practice land.
Yes.
Now that she's made the team again. So she did make it on, but she's now trying to fight to not be seen as just a blender or a person who sort of is in the middle of the dance that does everything well enough but isn't really a leader.
Yes.
And just kind of filler.
Even though every time she asks Kelly and Judy if she is like succeeding at standing out, they're like, not this year.
Not this year. No. And then she's trying to do that. And I put this slide because she says, I think we just need to practice and we're fighting each other's paces. She's saying things like very in the language of DCC.
Yes.
Like basically things she probably heard Kelly say.
Platitudes and vagaries are like the biggest part of the way people in this organization speak to each other.
Yeah. Then they show, again, them practicing formations, trying to get everything perfect on the video board. And then we see Reese talking to Will about visiting because he doesn't have a job yet in Dallas or he's moving there. And it's all in that process, talking about how she saw him every day in college and now it's weird with like their changing lives. Then we got a shot of the water tower that they always show in this, which I haven't mentioned before, but I will now, that says Coppell, Texas on it. And that is like what they use to signify we're going back to Victoria's house.
Yes, it is like a harbinger of Victoria. Like that is the omen. Every time you see like a sign or a water tower or anything indicating that we're in Coppell, Texas, you're like, oh, I better strap in for some crazy.
Yeah, and they go right from that to her filming a TikTok with her mom.
And like it's always so embarrassing when you're watching somebody film a TikTok or any kind of social media because like she messes up whatever like she wanted to do for it. And so she redoes it a bunch of times, but it's supposed to look like this like just like fun birthday thing. And then she's like, I messed up the choreography. Let me come in again.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh,
and
this
it looks,
is so
you
uncomfortable.
mentioned this, literally how it looked because they're all in pink. It looks like Mean Girls.
Yeah.
Amy Poehler.
Oh my God.
Like this is pulled directly from that.
Oh my God. No, it feels like that because like her mom is like hyping her up. It's very Amy Poehler in Mean Girls of like, yeah, do it.
Yeah. Regina George. She's like making Regina, right?
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
It happens in the movie.
And then this ends with Victoria saying over and over in like a sort of menacing way, I am behind in the game of life.
Yes.
And like you could tell like she said it once and her mom was kind of like, oh yeah, whatever. But then she like really wanted this to stick. So she kept saying it and it was like, ugh.
Which like her reasoning for that was that she like took a year off from DCC to recover from an eating disorder and that she like doesn't have a boyfriend currently, question mark.
She also says how her mom's really important to her because her dad and brothers have never been to a dance recital or a performance of hers.
That blew my mind. That blew my mind. I was like, seriously? You never? Not once?
That
She's in her
is
20s.
Really insane.
Like that feels very
And you know why?
wrong.
Probably because they're like, we don't do dance. That's for girls.
Yeah, probably.
Because they're from Coppell, Texas. So they literally won't go see her do the thing she loves the most.
Yeah, something's going on there. Not good. Like you can tell why Victoria's mental health is so bad. It's very obvious.
Yeah. She's struggling with her mental health and they're talking to her again on the field. And then, they cut to a little image of people saying that she was the most popular person in the rest of her life.
Yeah, because she's
her dance
like,
classes she teaches.
Yeah, she teaches dance classes and like apparently she's very well liked outside of this organization. And I'm like, the whole story arc of Victoria really broke my heart because it just sort of, I don't know, I really resonate with the experience of like, for some reason, whenever I am in this setting with these people, I am not a version of myself that I like, and I am not a version of myself that is successful. And I felt that way many times in my life in like performing capacities, either like in college when I felt like I was really overlooked and like not favored by my professors, or like in improv in certain situations where you're just like, for whatever reason, with these people in this place, I just am bad.
That's how I
They
felt.
think I'm bad, and then I perform bad.
Yeah, that's how I felt at like certain improv theaters. Where I'm just
Yeah.
like, I love this place. I know I can do what they want me to
Yeah.
do here, but they just don't seem to see something.
There were
It's just like, okay.
there were situations where I was performing, I would be given an opportunity that was like highly coveted, and I would be like, I know I'm capable of doing this, but because of the theater this is at and the politics of this theater and the leadership, I am going to have a panic attack every time I have to go on stage and do a bad job and end up sabotaging myself. And like that is what this reminded me of with Victoria.
And then we see them going over all the rookies and veterans like vote on each other, which I didn't even really realize
For like
happened.
leader positions, which
Yeah.
are basically, if I'm not mistaken, they divide the girls after Thunderstruck for the rest of the game. They're divided into different groups that enter from different parts
Yep.
of the stadium to do cheers, and the group leaders lead those.
Yes.
So,
And also sort of act as like mother figures for their groups.
right, exactly.
And they're talking about how Victoria didn't get any votes again. They just always railing on Victoria.
I know.
And she's talking about how she feels like she's the one who always shows up and is a veteran and knows all of her stuff, but never gets any of the attention. And then we move on to Reese and one of the others after going to church, talking about how they're going to eat and they're going to say a prayer. And she's like, should we pray?
Yep.
And then she's like, let it nourish our bodies and take any impurities out of this food. Lord
That
God.
was
A very strange prayer.
impurities.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm
As
not
if
even.
he's going to transmute the impurities out of your banana.
It was just very weird. Like you're eating like sandwiches. Like what are you talking about?
And then we cut to Nate, Kelsey's husband-to-be fiance, planning his proposal with her between acting gigs, supposedly. And he was like, a photographer reached out to me because she's a jealous Cowboys cheerleader and asked if I wanted to do like a photo shoot, or asked Kelsey if she wanted to do a photo shoot.
Yeah, so a photographer reached out to Kelsey
Yeah.
and was like, I want to give you a free photo shoot. And then Nate was like, this is a perfect opportunity to propose.
Because I'll have the camera ready. We'll be in like a flower garden.
Yes. And I kept being like on the way to this when she was like getting ready. And then they show her like she's in a white dress. I'm like, she really doesn't know?
I think she knew. I think she totally knew.
I think she knew.
Because like after she was talking to some of her friends and she was like, she took forever. Like I think like
Oh,
I
really?
overheard that. Yeah.
Took forever to do what?
Propose, I think.
Oh,
I think she was
see.
saying that she like basically knew it was happening.
I gotcha.
Especially because she seemed surprised, but like not that surprised.
She doesn't seem like someone you could surprise, actually.
No,
She
yeah.
seems like she knows everything that's happening at all times.
But the best part of this was the photographer.
He was amazing.
We thought he was going to be like some younger, like, I mean, he's not old, but some like sort of Gen Z like guy, like in out like LA guy.
Well, when she was like a photographer reached out to me on social media, I was not expecting this.
And he's just like just like an older photographer guy that's like really into photography.
Yeah.
And he's like singing and stuff in his directions to them. And
he's like a real character.
Go almost for the kiss, but don't kiss.
Yeah.
And then at one point he's singing as he's taking shots. He's like, give me the moment. And we just kept saying that over.
Our apartment at any given time, you can hear one of us going, give me the moment. I love this guy. I love this guy. It was like a very necessary release of tension to have someone with just like goofy energy.
All right, walk a little bit more, a little bit there.
Yep.
Give me the moment. So good. So Nate proposes.
Yeah.
And there's this party after they all come back to, and all the DCC are there. Big surprise party. And yeah, this is where they talk a little bit about after you finish your 5th year, you get married.
Yep.
Like that this is like a thing for DCC, because Caroline's freaking out as well that she's not on the track
Yeah.
to be married right after.
Yeah, she says you have to be getting engaged your last year on the team, which again, this feels very like Southern sorority culture based on like other things I have consumed, other media I've consumed of like this, I don't know, you audition to have this group of women that are your friends, but also like represents that you are a successful woman in the world. And then on your way out of that, you need to transition into like your wife era.
Yep. And Victoria's talking at the party, not really fitting in, but trying to talk to like some of the newbies, and is talking about how these relationships between like the girls matter more than one with a boy right now. And I remember you being like, oh, Victoria, you're so like, you can't see anything. Not that like she needs to get into a relationship, but your relationships with like you've tried enough there.
It just made me sad because I was like, you're not having relationships with these women seemingly.
So please leave and find ones. Yeah. Then we see Will finally visiting Reese.
Yes, he finally made it.
Back.
Honestly, that looked amazing. I was like, I would love someone to crack my back. Like, so later you're gonna pick me up and squeeze my back until it breaks.
And she tells the story of how they met, and they show him at the basketball game crowd surfing in Alabama.
Yep.
And then she reached out to his DMs, and there's a slide right here of him just looking goofy.
He looks smug as a bug.
And he's like, a couple weeks later, she actually slid into my DMs.
I know. Will.
And he started searching for jobs and got nothing, which everyone can relate to right now. And then they cut to a practice because they're getting close to the first preseason game. And they're practicing as the sun sets, Thunderstruck plays. And they're practicing that again. Then they cut back to Will. He's talking about how he put his arm around her during Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And she was like, I've never had a boy do that.
Yeah, she like freaked out.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's a lot of like sweetness with the two of them because their relationship does seem good in the sense that these are two people who come from the same values. They are heavily Christian values, which not my thing, but they do seem to genuinely really like each other and get along, and they're very sweet to each other. And he is very, very devoted to her.
Yeah. Here she says, my prayer was, if I meet someone, I pray that that is my husband. And here we are. And then,
which is interesting because if you pray that and then you meet someone, maybe he is your husband and maybe he is because you prayed it, but maybe it's because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're like, the person I meet is going to be my husband.
I'm just going to try one.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to have one strawberry acai refresher and have one boyfriend.
Yep.
I don't want to go too crazy.
No. And then we get this classic shot, which is one of my favorite still frames of the whole movie, where it's just Will saying, so I was like, my dream is to pursue this woman. Basically, he was saying, they asked him, what are your goals and dreams? And he said, my dream is to pursue Reese.
Jim, what are your dreams and goals? Answer correctly.
To pursue Andi.
Thank you. I don't know if it's going to happen for you this season. I don't know if you're up to this.
Oh, is there anything I could do?
I just don't think we have time.
I could change my hair color.
I don't think we have time. We only have 9 days.
I could change my hair color tonight.
I don't think we have time. We have made it to the first game.
Yes. And Kelsey's talking about how make sure you take a second to look around and enjoy the game because it's always so push, go, learn everything.
Honestly, I'm sure this part of it is super fun.
Yeah. When you're actually in it, you've already learned the whole thing.
Yeah.
You're just executing it for people that want to see you.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then there's a slide that ends this as they're about to go out, and it just says, you can never panic in show business.
And it's like all of them with their pom-poms like ready to go out. They're like standing in, I refer to this space as a vom in the theater, like which is like the little corridor that leads from like backstage out onto the stage when you're in like a round situation. I don't know what you would call this.
Okay.
In
Tunnel.
a tunnel.
Yeah.
Episode 6, 9 to 5. Cheerleaders interact with fans off the field, spreading joy. They later prepare for an epic Thanksgiving celebration featuring a legendary performer.
All right, so this episode opens with the whole entire Thunderstruck performance filmed like in a really cool way on the field, just kind of being like, hey, here's what this is all led to. And it is actually really cool.
I mean, it's amazing.
Then they do like kind of a stark cut to a bunch of sort of just regular looking dudes on a tour.
Oh, God.
And this is pretty painful.
I hated this.
This was tough because it's like them sort of just acting like cheerleaders and stuff, and he like makes them take a photo.
The tour guide is really leaning into like what every shitty man who has ever done this tour wants.
Yeah.
So yeah, he makes them like, he takes them. First of all, I'm like, why are you taking these guys into their locker room? That should be a private space. It should be only for the women. The women aren't in there at the time, but I'm like, why are they going in there?
They're going in because they can say, you guys want to see the cheerleaders locker room?
Yeah,
in
exactly.
like a weird horny way. And all the guys go, yeah.
Yeah. And they
pay for
all
that.
like pose like the women. He was like, stand in front of your favorite
So
cheerleader and
all the
do their
lockers have their
pose.
big
Cameo portraits.
shot
Yeah.
above them. And they're all doing like cheerleader poses, and he has them all like go do a pose of the girls, and it's played for laughs. In that article that I had you read earlier, not the Vox one, the other one, she mentions this as like a scene that really bothered her because like they've worked their whole life for this, and then these guys just come in and kind of mock them in their own locker room. It's just like it just kind of it shows you like what men think of these women and the whole image they're showing.
It's like you are watching these women basically uproot and disturb their entire lives for this. And then you have a guy who's wearing like, I don't know, like a reflective.
Yeah, he's got his high V's on.
Yeah, exactly. And is just like, look at me, I'm a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader.
Yeah.
And then that fucking tour guide had the audacity, which you could tell it was canned, and he says it on every tour. He was like, there's a no fraternization rule for the cheerleaders, so like they can't date any of the players, but they don't have that for the fans.
Yeah.
And it's like, ew.
Yeah,
Like,
you're
part of the
suggesting
whole-
that like these guys could date and sleep with these cheerleaders? Because no,
Because no.
because no, ever.
The only guy who is worthy of these cheerleaders is Will.
Yeah,
Surprisingly. It's gross but it's such a huge part of the DCC is like part of the thing that they are upholding on a pedestal, even though they won't say it directly, is the fact that every Randy Boot guy at home or in the crowd in the stands wants to sleep with these women.
yeah,
That is like part of the engine that drives this.
yep. Speaking of engines, we go to the bus driver.
Good segue.
And this is the bus driver
Oh, yeah.
scene where they're introducing us to the bus driver that's been with them since like Kelly's days.
Yeah.
Seems like a great guy.
He does.
Has sort of a rapport with Kelly that's like a love-hate
Yeah.
thing that you see in like older people working relationships, I think. Like, oh, I got to put up with him and we love each other. But
Yeah, and like he kept saying that he wants to retire, but Kelly keeps saying that like you can't
we can't
retire.
And he's telling them a little bit of the internal hazing, of which there's
Oh,
a
yes.
lot, that the cheerleaders that are the rookies need to unload the bags from the bus when they get back.
Yep.
Then we get a detour here where they give us a little history, but not too much. But there's probably a lot more that we could go into someday. But they go into a little history of DCC and Suzanne Mitchell, who was like the Kelly before Kelly. Kelly based herself on Suzanne Mitchell, who was like the one who came in under Tex Schramm initially and started this whole idea.
She was like the first one in charge of the
to
DCC.
like make DCC more than just cheerleaders. Like they
Yeah.
are going to be New York style, Rockette style dancers is what they said when they
Yes.
initially started this.
Yes.
I looked up, and that's what they wanted to like have in Dallas.
Yeah, and they show this particular screenshot here is of her like rules to abide by guide, which is very, very in line with any sort of like older fashioned, like here's etiquette for ladies. And
Yeah.
it's like very like stringent rules of like, don't have a muffin top in your uniform. Also like always be smiling, always be friendly. Like you're not just here to like be an excellent dancer. You're also here to like basically be like a Barbie doll representative of the
Yes.
organization.
Yes. Then we show another moment of them trying to humanize Kelly, her talking to her daughter who has to visit wedding dress.
She invites her mom to go wedding dress shopping with her. And it's funny because this is clearly, as you said, an attempt to humanize Kelly. And Kelly even resists it because like her daughter is like, do you want to come dress shopping with me? And then Kelly just sort of sits there with a blank face and just goes completely like expressionless and then like is silent. And then all the women in the room who are doing her makeup have to be like, she's crying.
She's
You
having
made
a
her
moment.
cry. She's having a moment. She's happy. And I'm like, this woman is so out of touch with her emotions and her facial expressions that like other people have to cue to her daughter.
Yeah.
Like she did think this was very special and important. She's just completely
not saying anything.
She's just inhuman at this point
Yeah.
and is restraining herself.
Yeah. Then they show some of the charity work and extra
yeah.
work the Cowboys cheerleaders do, which was, uplifting and cool.
No, I
but
mean like I think it's wonderful.
they go to like, different old folks' homes and other things and take photos. Then we sort of transition into a little bit of a darker period of the show, though, because they talk about, we were talking about the men posing on tours and stuff. Men and people in general want to pose with the cheerleaders and take photos because that's a big part of their appeal. And they do that, but they make all the men hold a football because they had too many men like inappropriately touching the cheerleaders. So they literally have a policy where they have a guy there that's like rips their hands off the women, which you need, which is sad, and hands them a football and says like they get a little handsy, so we give them a football. And then there's a slide here where the guy who's in charge of like sort of shepherding the cheerleaders' security detail was talking about how men seem to feel that there's like more of a connection going on with the cheerleaders in their little visit because that's the whole point of them. Is that they have to act nice to you. So like men will be like, oh, can I get their phone number? Or maybe they like me. And
I mean,
the security has to step in.
This is a part that really probably resonated with all women of like certain awful men, if you give them an inch, the inch being basic politeness. And in the case of the DCC, a required amount of like cheery personality and like excitement.
Photo ops and
It's like, I don't know why, but like, there's a certain bad type of dude that can't understand that a woman being nice to you or smiling at you or just like treating you with like basic decency, or in the case of the DCC, performing a
whole image
for you does not mean they like you. They don't know you. They just met you. They're taking a picture with you. You are nobody. And yet men are like, oh my God, like she's really into me. And it's like, oh my God, you're so sad. Hold the football, you fucking pervert.
Then we see Kelsey talking about how, you mentioned this earlier, she basically kind of like, when hard things happen, she has now turned to God. And it just kind of makes you go like, no, you have real hard things. Because her main story here is that someone put an air tag on her car. And this all is in the section where they're talking about the safety of the cheerleaders.
Yes.
And so someone, I think the season before or two, had put an air tag like tracker on Kelsey's car, found out where she lives, and she was just like totally terrified, as you would be.
Yeah, and like they resolved the issue as much as they could, but like it didn't seem like there was like a full resolution to that. And they show Kelsey in this Bible study moment in one of the locker rooms. So like they're having like a DCC, I don't know if it's like official, but they're like doing it at the cheerleading complex. And it's funny because my first reaction to this, seeing Kelsey sitting there and she has sort of like a very expressionless face. And like, as I've said, like this whole time I'm watching her, I'm like, she just seems kind of like aloof. And I'm sitting there being like, maybe she just thinks all of this is bullshit. And then they cut to her being like, this religious aspect of my life has been so important in like reconciling the fact that like some guy tried to like follow me home. And you're like, oh no.
And then she ultimately says that this is where she felt like God wanted her to be. So she still cheers. And then we go to the big Happy Thanksgiving moment where they talk about the Cowboys Thanksgiving tradition. Now, did you recognize those big Salvation Army like tubs they jumped in?
I mean, I feel like I've seen them before.
This became popular relatively recently in the history of like football and sports because I forget when it was, but Zeke, the Cowboys running back at the time, Ezekiel Elliott, jumped into one of these after scoring a touchdown on a Thanksgiving day.
I remember
And now
this.
ever since then, they've really leaned into the fact that people can fit in these giant Salvation Army bins.
Yes. Salvation Army, not a great organization, by the way. Just need to call that out.
And so they'll go in the big Salvation Army things, and this is just them, performing for their Thanksgiving day.
Charlotte talks about how like, early in the earlier days of the NFL, like other teams didn't want to perform on Thanksgiving because it's Thanksgiving, but like we took up the task of like being the American football representative of Thanksgiving.
It's just like, okay, cool. They're like, they didn't think they could sell tickets, but we can. We're the Cowboys. And it's like, okay, cool. But this is like their big moment. Then they're talking about how the Thanksgiving thing is coming up and it's going to be this big, huge thing. And they're going to have a special performer like they always do. And it's going to be Dolly Parton this year, if you remember that one.
I remember it vividly.
So the DCC are going to like perform in front of Dolly as she sings her halftime. So that's going to be a whole cool thing they get to do, which is very cool. But before that's, while it's all happening, there's drama.
Yes.
I think completely fabricated by Kelly.
Oh my God. Absolutely. 100,000%.
She called out Klein, who we never met yet, for asking about a Christmas tree ornament.
Yeah, so they all enter their locker room, and I'm assuming because it's like the Thanksgiving season, that's why they've already put the Christmas tree up, because, you know, I don't people have their traditions around Thanksgiving and Christmas and whatnot. So they all walk into the locker room, and like the Christmas tree is up, and then I guess Klein, one of the cheerleaders, innocently, seemingly was like, wait, where's my ornament? Because they all have ornaments on the tree. And this inspires Kelly to make everyone sit down in a circle like they're children and reprimands them about their attitude not being like thankful and appreciative enough. And it was very, we talked about this, it was very like toxic parent energy.
It was bad.
Of like, I'm really stressed out. I'm doing everything I can to prepare for Dolly Parton, because Kelly's constantly talking this about how important it is to her that Dolly Parton is the one that's performing. And she has this energy of like, how dare you, Klein, come in and ungratefully say,
ask for your ornament.
Where's my ornament?
Thank Michelle for putting the tree up first.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
you're like, oh my God.
Okay.
And she goes in on a couple other people too for just like overall being ungrateful. And I'm like, these are women you employ. You cannot have a conversation with them like they're a bunch of little babies and be like, you ungrateful children. It's like, you pay them to do a job.
Yeah. Then she pulls aside Klein and tells her that she loves her, but it's just about your timing. Shouldn't have said, ask for your ornament then. It's like, that's not what you said, though, out to everybody else.
Also, you shouldn't have, basically the timing was wrong because Kelly happened to be in the room. If she had done that when Kelly wasn't in the room and Kelly didn't hear it, wouldn't be a problem. Nobody would have cared. And that ruins Klein's like whole like attitude, because like Kelly leaves the room. Kelly always does this thing where she's like, are you okay? You promise? Like right after she's like ruined someone's life. Yeah. And then like leaves her in there to just cry, and like her teammates come in and check in on her and they're like, are you okay? And Klein's like, sure am not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we show them visiting their bus driver who was sick.
Yes. Oh, that was the other thing, because Kelly's like, the first thing I want to say is I told all of you to write get well cards for the bus driver.
Yeah.
And 10 of you
did not. Who do we think we are as DCC if you're not going to write that letter? And it's just like, okay, that reminded me of my mom telling me to write thank you notes or else.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like you're taking on this like this parental role, and then you're adding this layer of toxicity to it. And then you are taking grown women who you employ and screaming at them because they didn't write a get well card for the bus driver. And like, you should write a get well card for the bus driver because it's a nice thing to do, but like, you don't need to get shamed about it
He got 26.
Yeah, exactly. He got 26 cards. I know exactly, because there's only 36 women on the team.
Then we see Dolly coming in to the locker room, and Reese gets to meet her because Reese put together some flowers and things for her and found some pokeberries, which she used to use for blush.
Yep. Kelly,
back in the day.
This whole thing is so absurd to me. So like Kelly has a book about Dolly Parton where Dolly Parton talks about how like she her like makeshift makeup kit when she was younger was like she would burn some matches and then like use them to fill in her eyebrows, and she would mash up pokeberries and like use them for her blush. And so Kelly has this whole thing, because Reese also part-time works in a flower shop, and she's like, Reese, we really want you to like put a bouquet together with some pokeberries in it. And Reese is like so honored. And then they do that and they set it all up, and Kelly can't let it go. She literally has the book open to the page just in case Dolly doesn't remember her own life, I guess. Has the book open to the page of the pokeberries and the matches. And then as Dolly comes in, Kelly's like, and here's your pokeberries and here's your matches. And it's like, you can't, this kind of behavior drives me nuts when someone's like, look at this nice thing I did for you and look how much it means and look how much I know about you. And like, it's like, fucking relax. Also, like Reese is clearly like the favorite, because they call her into a special meeting to be like, can you put together a little bouquet for Dolly Parton?
You can meet her. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Then we get cut to Jerry Jones having old man, young person conversations with all of the girls that are like, go to the effect of, so Jerry, who was your favorite halftime show?
Yes.
Beyonce. Me too, Jerry.
I know. And then he starts talking about a bunch of nonsense. And it's like when you're talking to someone's grandpa at a family event and you're like, okay, I think someone in the other room wants to.
So they're at the Thanksgiving performance.
Dolly does her
whole thing.
the DCC cheerleaders dance. I remember watching this on TV when it aired. And God bless Dolly Parton. She looked amazing. She sounded amazing. They had her dressed like a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader, holding on for dear life onto the edge of like the Dallas star in the middle. And she's literally just singing and sort of like pacing back and forth while like gripping the star. And you're like, why didn't they put her in a different setting than this?
Yeah. Anyway, then the cheerleaders go and they just finish their job, which is like being on the sidelines for the rest of the game.
And then Kelly is backstage in the complex and she's fielding like texts and messages on her phone of like, the Dolly performance was so amazing. Oh my God. And like, so she's like, Kelly's really soaking it all in of like, oh, all my hard work and like everyone's complimenting me and I'm in my little pink outfit. And then one of the members of the staff comes in and is like, somebody inappropriately touched Sophie. And this moment was very revealing. I was reading an article and like they talk about this particular moment. So like Kelly's on her phone celebrating herself and then somebody tells her that about Sophie and she doesn't do anything about it right away because the people are like, okay, so she's talking to security, she's talking to the police, whatever. And so Kelly's initial response is like, okay, well, if she's talking to the right people. And then she literally makes very quick eye contact with the cameras and seems to remember that like she's being filmed and like is probably going to be critiqued for like how she handles it. And all of a sudden she snaps out of her like reverie of like being complimented for the Dolly performance and like stands up and is like, I'm going to go find Sophie and like does what she should have done initially. And it's just it's weird because like they've set up the whole episode framed around the idea that like the cheerleaders do need to be protected from terrible men who do terrible things. And yet in the moment where someone needs the most protection,
it almost seemed like they were like, can we just make this go away?
There was a quick moment where you're like, Kelly is debating whether or not she even wants to like address this as a real issue.
Yeah.
We have made it to the last episode. Episode 7, Sisters for Life. Cheerleaders unite to overcome obstacles. Former team members make a nostalgic comeback for a season finale performance.
So we pick up right in the middle of the action that they cut off for. Cool documentary technique where they take a tense moment and split it. And then start.
And you're like, it's not like I'm going to take a break. I'm here on the couch.
So it's Kelly walking with Sophie and asking her what happened. Sophie says that he grabbed her butt and waist. It was a photographer on the sideline and moved on. And she looked around and made sure she knew who it was because she knew right away that it was not cool.
Yep.
And figured out who it was. Then all of her team comes in and is actually really supportive and telling her it's not your fault.
Yeah.
And you did the right thing. And then all the other women sort of chiming in here being like, yeah, just because we put on this uniform doesn't make us an object.
It's very interesting because it's like these women all know. Like these women all know. They're incredibly talented and also incredibly intelligent and successful in other areas that have nothing to do with DCC. But this whole time you're sort of like, okay, it seems like we're like letting a lot of things go unsaid about like what the problems are. So it was nice to hear all of the women be like, yeah, this aspect of the job sucks because men think they're entitled just because like we look hot and like are interacting with them. The thing that the step further that they don't go is like, because this organization literally trots us out in front of these men and presents us as sex objects.
Yep.
It's always men's fault, but
it really is. And then they cut to a slide after conducting an investigation, which included reviews of security footage at AT&T Stadium. Arlington Police Department determined there was not enough evidence to conclude that a criminal offense occurred. Of course, in the entirety of that stadium with 1 million cameras, there was not a shot of it.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, we're watching all the women's faces on the big screen to make sure that they're smiling broadly and not looking like they're exerting too much energy doing an insane athletic feat, but we don't have anything. Oh, then we head into the Christmas season, which seems absolutely insane.
So they're doing games and stuff on the weekends, prepping for that, and then they're doing these Christmas performances. Yeah, they just talk about how this is the busiest time of the year, and they just got to push through. And they talk about how brilliant Kelly is when it comes to coming up with ideas for the big performances.
In this case, the idea is basic glow-in-the-dark technology.
Glow-in-the-dark pom-poms. She says the first of its kind ever.
Yes.
Really?
Okay. I mean, I will say it looks cool.
It does look cool.
Like, it's a good idea.
But
it's
some
just
of her
like,
ideas were like that they were saying were like genius. We're just like putting lights on.
Yeah, they were like, I don't know how she comes up with this. I'm like, making it dark and then the pom-poms glow? I don't know. That's like kind of...
Yeah.
Go to Party City and find a lot of stuff that's pretty similar.
Yeah. Then they cut to them doing appearances.
Oh, God.
And this is Reese and another one of the cheerleaders, I forget who, doing an appearance together where they sign autographs. And one of the women is handing them some photos of like the cheerleaders in their sexy outfits. And the two are signing them for them. And they're like, oh, who's it for? Like, and she's like, oh, it's for my sons. They're 16 and 14. So they'll like this. And I was just like, oh.
Yeah.
Like we turned to, so your 16 to 14-year-old are going to masturbate to this photo. That's basically what you said.
I don't know where this fits into the season, but they do an alumni performance.
It's near the end.
Yeah, it's near the end. And so they invite, alumni as far back as they can go to perform. Is it Thunderstruck?
It is, but they do like an abridged, sort of dumbed down. Like, my mom used to do jazzercise when I was a kid, and there was the people doing the regular ones, and there's always someone doing a modified version in the back.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe with some lesser weights or no weights.
Yes, I mean that's
kind of what's going on.
Yeah,
here.
that's what's going on here.
And yeah, they have.
But they had like people as old as 72 years old, like coming back to perform for this alumni event, and like. On the one hand, this whole documentary series, I was experiencing such cognitive dissonance because I was like, the girlhood and sisterhood aspect of this is like one of my favorite things about being in the world and being a woman is like other women who understand you and are like part of your inner circle and like have faced the same challenges you have faced and support you. Like there's no feeling in the world quite like that. On the other hand, you're also like, you're 72 years old and you're still carrying this with you. And like the organization was probably 1,000 times more toxic than it is now when you were in it. And it's so toxic now. And you're just like, woof.
Yeah. And there's literally one of them saying it's like living your glory days all over again.
Yes.
And so like they have ways to like bring people back in. And like you said, it's used as sort of this sisterhood bonding, and that's cool. I think it's cooler for the older people because they aren't in the toxicity. It's more just a fun moment.
For sure.
But they are definitely all still, carrying that trauma.
Yeah.
To some extent. And then we cut to Caroline talking about how her surgeon wouldn't be happy that she's doing the alumni halftime. Because why is she doing it? Because she has to.
Because she can't not.
And then that woman who talks to them, the Christy whatever Scales, she is telling them on the bus in this scene that they have one more home game for the playoffs.
Yes.
And then
unless the Cowboys win more.
But they didn't because that was when they got wrecked by my Packers last year. Hell yeah.
This was funny because we've caught up to the point where like we know, well, I didn't know because I didn't remember, but like you were like, I know what happens here because I remember this game.
Yeah. And they get beat by the Packers. Hell yeah. Dallas sucks. And Dak Prescott is sad. And
then just like that, Kelly's standing in the dressing room with all of them and is like, this is the last time we will be in this room together as a team. And you're like, that's it?
Yeah.
Like that was fast.
And then they show them having to, right after that, probably I think in the week after, come in one by one with Kelly and Judy there. And there's 2 racks and you have to put your cheerleading outfit on one of the racks, one if you're trying out next year and one if you're not, which again, so toxic. Why do we have to make this decision right now? They say it's because they're making a calendar and the calendar is going to feature girls only that are going to be around next year or at least are trying out because we don't want to have like
that was the moment where I was like, so if you're going to put them in the calendar, then you know that you're going to take them back. So maybe we don't need to audition
them
the
again.
People. Like that was a moment where I was like, you guys are kind of showing your hand here that like not everybody is equal at the beginning of auditions because you are so obsessed with the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader brand that you would not put someone in the calendar. But because the calendar has to go to the printers, you need to know who's coming back. And based on that, you're like, well, we're definitely going to have these people back on the team. Also, just like the whole like pomp of like ceremoniously put your outfit on the rack. I'm like, first of all, keep the outfit. You should get to keep the outfit. Second of all, like, why do you have to do the whole rack thing? Like, again, things that could be handled via email.
And then we see the closing of the arc of Victoria.
Oof.
After this whole season's done, she is one of the people sitting there with the choice to put her uniform on the rack. We don't know if she's going to come back for a 5th year or be done with this toxic institution. And she has a pretty straightforward conversation where she's like, I'm going to go in and get some answers.
Honestly, I actually was like, hell yes, Victoria.
Yeah. She like stood up for herself and she was like, what can I do? And do you see me being on this team, being a leader on this team? And they essentially played dumb. Like they didn't realize what she was saying when she's literally been saying this for 5 years.
I know. They're like, we didn't think you wanted that.
What? It's like all she wants.
And I'm like, it's literally coming out of her pores how badly like she wants.
And they tell her she had less energy this year, gave her some really vague notes.
Yeah. And then also tell her that she's like, they basically allude to the fact that like she might not even make the team again.
Yeah.
And she was like, you really wouldn't put me on the team as a 5th year vet? And they were like, maybe not.
And then she, in the moment, puts her thing on the one for coming back. And you kind of sink.
She loses her nerve. But I really appreciated that she kind of came in guns blazing and was like, I need you to be direct with me. And then Kelly and Judy were like, no, thank you.
Yeah. I know your mom, so no.
No.
Then they call in Kelsey and she talks about, this is like the opposite of Victoria, who was asking them, I want to be a leader on this team. I want to be one of those group leaders. I want more responsibilities. Give this to me. I want to take it on.
Yep.
And then they cut to Kelsey, who is thanking them for her time there. And one of the big things she thanks them for is, I really think I would have been a lot more insecure as a leader if you wouldn't have given me your support. So those just complete, like they picked a favorite. They don't like Victoria. They like her.
You can just see right away, like putting those, these are the things that make this documentary series so good, is they were so strategic about how they painted the picture of like, Victoria is literally sitting across from these two women, begging them to accept her and telling them like with every fiber of her being, she just wants to be accepted by them. And they're like, no. And then you have the next person come in and it's Kelsey and they're like, from day one, they have clearly always been like raising her up the way they're clearly doing to Reese right now.
Yeah. And then they cut to a really slowed down version of Girls Just Want to Have Fun, which is really cool.
This hit me right in the heart.
And they play, it's a real slow, and then it cut to a montage essentially of them at their like end of year party. And it works really well to kind of like say what the documentary's been saying in a sort of thematic, artistic way.
Yeah, 100%.
And then you got Victoria not being in the mood for the party and leaving.
The way she's like, I need to get the fuck out of here.
And then she says, finally at the end, I've decided to hang up my pom-poms. I haven't even told Kelly and Judy yet.
I mean,
it's a pretty triumphant moment.
It's a pretty triumphant moment.
Just like, fuck this. Then in the credits, I watched a little further than we did. They ask Will about when him and Reese's wedding is. And this is just another perfect
I didn't see this
thing. And he goes, it's on 4/20 and goes, and then it cuts right to Reese, who says, like, why is that even a day? Like, I don't even understand. And so their wedding was on 4/20. Will generally kind of knew. Reese had no idea and had to explain.
Will had to explain. She's new in the world. She's new in the world every day.
Then I wanted to just leave a little bit of time at the end here for our thoughts and some thoughts sort of from some of the articles that we've read.
This is from that same Globe and Mail article that we read from earlier. America's Sweethearts demonstrates that the culture of impossible female perfection persists not only because men perpetuate it, but because women do too. Some things have improved for women since 1972, but much has not. Back then, to cite a glaring example, abortion rights for U.S. women were about to be enshrined in law. Now they're gone. By insisting that things, standards, traditions, even uniforms stand still, we go backward. And then this is from a New York Times article. Much has been made over the years of the cheerleaders' paltry compensation.
One veteran describes the pay as what a full-time Chick-fil-A employee would make. And the cheerleaders make what they do only because a former cheerleader named Erica Wilkins sued the Cowboys in 2018 for back wages. As my friend Sarah Heppola, who was a story consultant on the Netflix show, wrote in 2022 for Texas Monthly after the suit, quote, the cheerleaders' game day pay went from $200 to $400, and rehearsal pay went up to $12 an hour. But that still isn't a drop in the bucket given the Cowboys' oceans of wealth.
$12
That's
an hour
so
for rehearsal?
insane. As I watched, I realized that this extremely high level of competition reminded me of the dynamic I see today in kids' sports. A lot of people making a lot of money off the passion and talent of young athletes. Once upon a time, you could play many sports through the high school level, mainly for the love of the game. Today, there's an ever more competitive industrial complex behind youth athletics. Increasingly, the hoped-for payoff is going pro, winning a college scholarship, or just gaining an edge in college admissions, even though most young athletes in organized sports never get any of these things.
Yeah, so those were just some takes and thoughts I read around the internet. What are your thoughts on some of these?
I mean, there's so much here in the way that it relates to just being a woman in the world, but also being a performer in the world of any gender. It's capitalism rearing its ugly head of like the opportunities that you want the most coveted ones are usually in the hands of the most evil people who want to withhold the opportunities as much as possible. And also, if they give them to you, pay you the least amount of money for it, and also continue to, even while you have the opportunity, put you in this mindset that like you could lose it at any moment. That like
it's calculated.
They've convinced them that what they're doing is actually priceless, and therefore like the fact that they get paid at all is actually kind of amazing because what they're doing is of such value that you can't even really put a monetary value on it. And it feels real to them because friendship is priceless, and you know, being able to perform at that level does feel priceless, but like the withholding nature of it and the fact that it could always be taken away from you is there on purpose to make you feel like it is more valuable than the money. Mm-hmm. It's very messed up.
It's disturbing. Yeah. One thought I had here that I was just thinking of as I watched this, that's kind of just unrelated, but a take. It felt to me as I watched this, because I've been reading a lot for an upcoming episode about North Korean propaganda gymnastics.
Don't spoil it.
I'm not really spoiling it, but they do this sort of mass propaganda acts. We don't do that in America per se. Mm-hmm. Now, we found out from the military and sports episode we had that we actually do pay for it sometimes, or we did, and we do it. But the way that propaganda manifests in a capitalist society is with things like the Cowboys. Mm-hmm. It's paid for by the people or whatever. It's a business or whatever, but it is an American business, and therefore the Cowboys are American propaganda.
They're
acting
America's
like
team.
A private company. It is a private company, but they're doing all of the propaganda on behalf of one way of America. Yeah, and that is. I just was thinking about how like propaganda won't manifest in rows and rows of soldiers in the streets, at least at the moment, but it does manifest in rows and rows of starred cheerleaders on our TVs.
Oh my God. Like a couple of times they said like, don't tarnish the star. Yeah. And I was like, what? Yeah. I was like, what?
So I don't know. It was just a thought I kind of had as this was ending. There's all this other sort of stuff. There's stuff about women and stuff about
there's a lot.
But there's stuff about propaganda.
I really appreciated that the documentary did such a good job of like the way they organized things and the way they showed things really showed all of like the glaring issues with it without specifically saying it. Mm-hmm. And what's cool about that is that on the other side of things, depending on who you are watching this, you could just watch this and be like, hell yeah, Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, which is probably why they were okay with this being out in the world.
Yeah. But if you have any media literacy, you can think about what a documentarian is doing here.
Right.
You can see like he's doing these choices or they're making these choices.
Yeah. Cause like, it's funny cause I followed some of the girls on Instagram and they're all promoting the documentary. Yeah. But it's funny cause like me watching it being like, doesn't paint everything in a great light. Mm. My final thoughts on this are just like, honestly, even the women I completely disagree with, I would die for all of these women. They're so talented and they're working so hard and like their level of support and friendship for each other, even if it's like not 100% real, is just like, I don't know, it just resonates very deeply with me because like being a woman in the world is very challenging.
That being said, I think Kelly and Judy need to retire and reflect on the fact that they have psychologically ruined like probably tens, maybe 50s, maybe hundreds of women.
Yeah. We need dance opportunities that are professional
Yeah.
for people to showcase these skills. I just don't think it's this
Probably not.
exact manifestation.
Probably not.
All right. Well, that is our marathon of an episode on the entire series of the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleader series. We hope you enjoyed that.
We're going to go practice our jump splits now.
Yeah, and try not to get hip surgery after. We will see you next time. If you'd like to support our show, you can do that on Patreon. Thank you if you've already done that. You can go to patreon.com/SKDKpod or into the notes of any of our episodes to join there and get bonus episodes every month and just support us for making this.
Yes, thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.